Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're digging into the Canadian housing market, specifically April 2025.
Yeah, there's a really interesting piece from the Globe and Mail, Regional Disconnect in Canadian Housing Market. That's our main source today.
Right, and that title says a lot, a disconnect. So our mission is to unpack that divergence, why some areas are slowing down while others are, well, booming.
Exactly, hitting record highs even.
Okay, so let's use this Globe and Mail piece. What's the big picture it painted for April, nationally speaking?
Well, nationally, things were definitely cooler compared to last year. The article cites the average national home price down 3.9% year over year.
Okay.
And the MLS benchmark price, that dropped 3.6%. Seasonally adjusted sales also fell about 7.5%.
So down across the board nationally, but like the title suggests, that's not the whole story, is it?
Not at all. The article really stresses that this national cooling is heavily driven by what's happening in Ontario and BC.
The two biggest markets, historically.
Right. And the source says prices there have basically rolled back to where they were in early 2021.
Early 2021 levels. Wow. But here's the kicker, the disconnect part. While Ontario and BC are cooling,
Other places are on fire. The article highlights Quebec and Nova Scotia. They actually set new records, both average and benchmark prices in April.
new records. Seriously.
Yep. And it doesn't stop there. The source mentions at least one price metric hitting an all-time high in 5 other provinces, too.
Okay, that is a stark difference. Two major provinces pulling the average down, while many others are pushing higher than ever. So the big question the article tackles, why? What's causing this split?
The source digs into that. First, it kind of rules out unemployment as the main culprit.
Right, I saw the numbers mentioned. Quebec at 6%, BC 6.2%, Ontario a bit higher, 7.8% unemployment in April.
Exactly. And the point made is, while there are differences, they're not dramatic enough, especially between, say, Quebec and BC, to explain such wildly different housing outcomes.
So if it's not jobs, primarily.
The article points squarely at affordability, or lack thereof, really.
Affordability. That makes intuitive sense, especially with interest rates not looking like they'll return to those super low levels. How does the article back that up?
It compares incomes to home prices. It notes that median personal incomes, using 2023 data, are actually pretty similar across key provinces like Ontario, Quebec, BC, Alberta, all in the $45,000 to $48,000 range, roughly.
Okay, so people earn roughly similar amounts, median-wise.
Pretty much. But then look at house prices. The article highlights that average or benchmark prices in Ontario and BC are, get this, 55% to 85% higher than in places like Alberta and Quebec.
55 to 85% higher, with similar incomes.
Exactly. That huge price-to-income gap.
Yeah.
According to the source, that's what's really putting the brakes on demand in Ontario and BC. Buyers just can't make the numbers work like they perhaps still can in Quebec or Nova Scotia.
Yeah, that percentage really drives the affordability point home. And this must be showing up in sales numbers too, right? Fewer transactions.
Definitely. The article talks about transaction volumes. Nationally, sales are down, as we said, but regionally, big drops, double-digit year-over-year declines in Ontario, BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan.
Wow, a lot of hesitation there. But Quebec again, the outlier.
Quebec is the outlier here, too. While those other provinces saw a sales tank, transactions in Quebec actually rose 10% compared to last year.
Up 10%.
Yep. Compare that to Ontario, down over 20%, BC, down nearly 15%.
Yeah.
It really suggests, as the source implies, that buyers and sellers in the high-cost areas are kind of stuck, hesitant at these price levels.
So, looking forward, what does the Globe and Mail piece suggest might happen next? Any predictions?
Well, it's cautious. It says the market's path depends on the usual suspects. Interest rates, maybe 1 or 2 cuts this year, is the expectation, jobs, market sentiment, population growth,
Standard factors.
standard factors. But it concludes that Ontario and BC seem more vulnerable to ongoing price pressures. And even the hot markets, like Quebec, could face headwinds if the wider economy takes a hit.
Okay, so let's wrap this deep dive. The key takeaway from this Globe and Mail article seems pretty clear. April 2025 showed a Canadian housing market really split in two.
Yeah, a major regional divide.
And it's driven less by immediate economic pain like job losses and more by these long-term affordability problems finally catching up in places like Ontario and BC.
While other regions like Quebec and Nova Scotia, where prices haven't run up quite as insanely relative to incomes, still had room to grow. That price-to-income ratio seems critical right now.
Absolutely. So thinking about this divide, this regional disconnect, and the uncertain road ahead, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? How might these different paths impact things like people moving between provinces? provinces, or maybe even how national economic policy gets shaped? What really stands out to you when you look at this data? Something to think about.